classroom was buzzing with chatter, a low hum of alien languages mixing with human voices. The instructor, tall and imposing, raised a hand, and the noise fell into silence. "Pick a partner," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen the worst of the galaxy and expected efficiency above all else. Eyes flicked around the room. Most students paired off immediately, choosing classmates with familiarity or skill, the ones who would ensure their projects would succeed. But one figure sat at the back row, ears twitching slightly beneath her silvery hair. The Fox Princess, as she was whispered about in the corridors, though none dared say it aloud to her face, observed quietly, her amber eyes scanning the room like a predator measuring prey. He noticed her immediately, not because she was the last to move or because of her delicate, otherworldly features, but because of the aura she radiated. Calm, confident, dangerous, yet inviting in the most subtle way. He was a human student, relatively new to the Interstellar Academy, with more curiosity than skill. His first instinct was to shrink back, to pretend he hadn't noticed the princess at all. But as she slowly rose from her seat, gliding toward the back row where he sat, his heart betrayed him. She stopped in front of him, tail flicking lazily behind her. "Are you available?" she asked, voice soft but commanding. He swallowed, unsure if his throat was dry or if his mouth had suddenly forgotten how to speak human. I guess so," he stammered. "Good," she replied, seating herself beside him. The room seemed to exhale collectively, a ripple of whispers spreading through the classmates. No one had expected the Fox Princess to choose the back row, and certainly no one had expected her to choose him. The instructor began to explain the assignment, a simulation of planetary diplomacy, where students would negotiate trade agreements and security pacts for a fictional star system. Each pair would be judged not only on strategy, but on creativity and adaptability. For the human, the words felt heavy. He had never negotiated with anyone, let alone someone whose presence seemed to bend the room around her. "You're quiet," she observed, tilting her head. "Do you always freeze when someone looks at you, or am I special?" He blinked. I just don't want to mess this up." A soft laugh escaped her, like the sound of wind through leaves. "Messing up is how you learn. Trust me. Even a princess makes mistakes." The first phase of the simulation began, and they were thrust into a virtual environment of floating star cities and shifting trade routes. Other pairs scuttled around their holographic consoles, shouting orders and strategies, but he and the Fox Princess moved in a strangely synchronized way. She suggested bold maneuvers, often counterintuitive, and he followed, letting instinct guide him. "You have an interesting approach," she said after they unexpectedly secured an alliance between two hostile planets. "You mean lucky?" he replied, shaking his head. "I just press buttons." "Luck is part of skill," she said, eyes glinting. "Some humans forget that." By the third hour, the classroom had grown tense. Several groups had already fallen behind, frustrated by their partners or the complexity of the simulation. But the human and the Fox Princess pressed forward, quietly strategizing, sometimes exchanging glances rather than words. She began teaching him subtle techniques, how to read the holographic data as if it were a living map, how to anticipate other pairs' moves, how to think like a negotiator and not just a player. He began to see her in a new light, not as a royal figure or a legend whispered about in the halls, but as a teacher in her own right, patient and exacting, with a spark of mischief that made even the most frustrating setbacks feel like a challenge rather than a punishment. During a brief pause, he noticed she was staring at one of the simulation's secondary stars, a distant sun in the holographic sky. "You think too much," he said softly. "I think enough," she replied. "But I also look. Seeing the bigger picture matters." By the time the final phase arrived, the pairs were exhausted. Fingers hovered over holographic panels, eyes strained against the bright glow of the simulation. The human was nervous, but he felt steady knowing she was beside him, her calm confidence anchoring him. They faced the ultimate scenario, a crisis where multiple planets were on the brink of war, and alliances were fragile at best. Every decision was critical. The instructor walked among the desks, observing, occasionally nodding or frowning. "Ready?" she asked, voice low. "As I'll ever be," he replied, though his palms were sweaty. Together, they navigated the final challenge with a mixture of daring and precision. The Fox Princess suggested a gambit that seemed reckless, to offer one planet's critical resources to another in exchange for loyalty. A move that risked losing everything if the simulation misjudged them. He hesitated but trusted her instinct. When the results flashed across the room, a wave of disbelief passed through the students. Not only had they succeeded, but they had done so with a score higher than any pair in recent memory. The instructor's eyes widened slightly, a rare sign of approval crossing his usually stern features. "You," he said, pointing at the human, "showed remarkable growth. And you," he added, nodding toward the Fox Princess, "demonstrated leadership beyond your rank. Together, you achieved something. Unusual?" The class erupted in murmurs and scattered applause, but, for a moment, it felt like the human and the Fox Princess existed in their own world. They smiled at each other, a quiet acknowledgement of what they had accomplished. After the simulation ended, the princess gathered her things. "Not bad for a back row choice," she said, tail swishing behind her. "I didn't expect to." He began, then stopped. Realizing words would fail to capture the mix of awe and gratitude he felt, she leaned close, just enough that he could see the subtle spark in her eyes. "Expect nothing. Learn everything. That's the human way, isn't it?" He laughed softly, and she smiled, a rare, fleeting curve of lips that seemed to light the dim classroom. Over the next few weeks, the human found himself drawn into her orbit. Other students whispered about their partnership, about the audacity of the princess choosing someone so unassuming, but he didn't care about whispers. He cared about learning, about the subtle lessons she imparted, about the way she made the impossible seem achievable. One afternoon, as they studied together in the quiet corner of the academy library, she paused, glancing at a holomap of a distant system. "You've improved," she said. "Faster than I expected. I had a good teacher," he admitted, his voice soft. She smirked. "I teach more than tactics. I teach perception, patience, and courage. That's harder than any simulation." He looked at her, realizing that she had chosen him not because of skill or appearance, but because she saw something in him. Something worth guiding, worth trusting. A quiet spark that could grow into brilliance if nurtured. Months passed, and their partnership became legendary among the academy students. They navigated simulations, debates, and even small crises together, learning from each other and teaching one another in subtle, unspoken ways. He learned to anticipate her thoughts, to read her expressions, to understand strategy not as a sequence of actions, but as an art of human and alien intuition combined. The Fox Princess, in turn, discovered patience in him, a grounded perspective that tempered her boldness. She learned to trust, not just her instincts, but the human beside her. A connection grew between them, quiet yet unshakable, forged in the fires of simulated diplomacy and the quiet intensity of shared focus. One evening, as the academy dormitories emptied and the twin suns set over the distant horizon, they sat on the roof of the training hall, watching the stars appear one by one. "Do you think it matters," he asked, "that I'm human and you?" "Well, you?" She didn't answer immediately. Her ears twitched in thought. "No," she said finally. "It matters only what you do, how you learn, and who you choose to trust. The rest is noise." He smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the suns. "Then I choose to trust you. Then I choose to trust you," she replied, tail curling around her. Even in the back row, sometimes the best lessons are learned quietly, where no one is watching. As night fell and the stars above shimmered like scattered jewels, they sat together, partners in learning, in strategy, and in quiet understanding. The academy, the simulations, the whispers all faded into insignificance. What mattered was trust, growth, and the bond formed between a human and the Fox Princess who had chosen the back row, and chosen him in the days and years to come. Their partnership would become a story told quietly among students, a tale of courage, trust, and the surprising power of choosing differently. The human would remember that first day, the moment she walked past the crowd and chose him. And he would know that sometimes the greatest lessons and the most extraordinary adventures begin not in the front row, but in the quiet corners where fate decides to intervene, and the fox princess, ever regal, ever cunning, ever wise, would remember the human who had met her intelligence with humility, her daring with patience, and her trust with reverence. Together, they would rise not because the galaxy demanded it, but because they had chosen each other quietly, deliberately, in the back row where legends often begin.